All right, we're going to call this meeting to order of the Assembly of Delegates. And then before Clerk Fletcher, I ask you to go through the opening ceremonies. Delegate King, I know you've got your mic unmuted right now. If you wouldn't mind muting that just for the echo in the room. And then Clerk Fletcher, if you could take us through the opening ceremonies.
All right, it is December 17th, 2025 at 4 p.m. And this is the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates regular meeting pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025. This meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates will be conducted both in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Members of the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. A public participation guide and meeting documents are available in advance at www.capecod.gov. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other category protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Marchak, Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator at jmarczak@capecod.gov. Call 508-375-6646 or visit the website. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams, and all of that information is available on the web.
Thank you. And now a moment of silence to honor our troops, those serving in our country, and those who have died in service to our country. And now, if we can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And with that, Clerk Fletcher, if you wouldn't mind calling the roll.
All right. Delegate Frederickson,
Here.
Delegate Frizzell,
Here.
Delegate Fuller,
Here.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Here.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Here.
Delegate Killian, Delegate King,
Here.
Delegate O'Malley,
Here.
Dean Omen,
Here.
Delegate Sampson,
Here.
Delegate Ty,
Here.
Speaker Warner,
Here.
Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Here.
All right. Oh, that's tallying weird. Definitely a quorum.
Yes. And now if I can get a motion to approve the minutes in the Journal of November 19th, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Clerk, we can get a roll.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizzell.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Green, I skipped. She's not here. Delegate Killian, Delegate O'Malley. Yes. Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo. That's 12, representing 87% of the county's population.
Fantastic. And lastly, if we can get a motion to adopt the order of business for today.
So moved.
We can get a roll call vote.
All right, Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizzell.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian, Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate King. That's a yes, I think, right? Yes. All right, Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Delegate, or Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo,
Yes.
That passes 12 delegates representing 87.08% of the county's population.
Fantastic. And with that, we'll enter the committee of the whole and have communications from members of the public, if we've got any here or online. Seeing none, we'll move on to communications from the regional commissioners, administrators, and director.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have just an update on the regional commissioners meeting this morning that I wanted to give you. They heard from Leah Hamner, who is our epidemiologist, as well as Escher Cattle, who's our entomologist, both on tick-borne illnesses, specifically the alpha-gal tick, which is seems to be exploding in population, certainly on Martha's Vineyard and to some extent on the Cape. So we are fully expecting more of that in the upcoming summer. They heard from Sonia Sheasley on the annual report. The 2025 annual report has been posted on the website. So if anybody's interested, the content is always riveting, but the pictures are pretty spectacular. And so for no other reason, check out the pictures. Actually, I will say that in this year's annual report on the finance section, we've added some graphs and charts, which make it a lot easier to read. So hopefully people really will read it. So they also voted proposed ordinance to transfer unreserved fund balance, some unreserved fund balance to the Capital Stabilization Fund. I'll let Carol talk a little bit more about that. They voted a revised 2027 capital budget, and I will let Vera talk about that. I don't want to give away all the fun. Also voted an updated employee reimbursement policy reflective of some obvious changes in the cost of travel, mostly travel. And they also voted to send a letter of opposition to Massachusetts House Bill 3971, which would direct or order a legislative study on the feasibility of placing registries of deeds for county governments that have not been abolished under the oversight of the Secretary of the Commonwealth. So that would take our registry of deeds, and instead of being a county department, would shift it to be a under the purview of the Secretary of State in the Commonwealth. So they were opposed to that, as is the current Register of Deeds and longtime Register of Deeds. And in other business on their consent agenda, I won't go through the whole thing, but they approved a dredge contract for Yarmouth. They also approved simultaneous representation by KP Law on an affordable housing matter coming out of Provincetown. And and they also voted an extension of the contract for hazardous waste collection for another year at the same contract price that we had it for this fiscal year. And those are the big items, and so that's what they did. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Delegate O'Malley?
Is the annual report still printed?
No.
No, not.
It is not printed. Yep. And I believe that we stopped printing that a number of years ago, several years ago, before my time, but it's not printed.
Delegate Harder?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Two quick things, plus a comment. You didn't mention that the fabulous pictures were by Paul Rosala.
I was saving that part.
Oh, sorry, I blew it. Two quick things. The tick presentation was terrifying. Is our lab, the county lab, doing testing for that?
No, our
situation?
county lab only tests water. So that would
Oh,
be,
okay.
that would essentially be
Yeah.
a blood test, which we do not do. We do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, you mentioned the, extension of the contract hazardous wastes collection, which starts in January 26th. Which we're, extending, paying more money to. Was that money already in the budget? That
Yes,
the extra amount of money, it's not taking more money from somewhere else.
correct. And that is, it was a little, that their agenda item was a little confusing because at first blush, it looks like we're doubling the amount that we're giving them for no apparent reason. But it's actually an extension of the contract. And when we do extensions, we extend the cost portion and the time portion. And so it looks like it's double, but it's to fund the following year. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then our finance director is now presenting the fiscal year 26 quarter one financial results. I think you have a presentation you're sharing as well.
This one. Okay, I got it. Yes, thank you very much. Carol Capola, I'm the Finance Director and Treasurer here at Barnstable County. I do have a presentation for you that I'd like to share on your screen. I've also provided a printout of this PowerPoint presentation as well. So give me 1 second.
No worries. Thank you very much.
On a quarterly basis, I provide the Board of Commissioners and the Assembly of Delegates with a report of the financial performance of the county for this is for the first quarter of fiscal year 2026. The finance department, as of September 30th, was managing over $76 million in funds. Those funds were contained within 101 funds, separate funds of the county. Let's see if I can stop that from happening. And there we go. So the county also manages at this point 23 different bank accounts with varying institutions. Some of those accounts are required to be separated, such as the Gates Foundation grant that the county recently received. We're required to separate that into a special account and transfer funds into and out of that account as they're expended or received. Same thing with the ARPA fund. The same holds true with stabilization fund, trust funds, things of that nature. And then in some point, we diversify funds too. We're looking at banking institutions where we can take advantage of interest rates without providing significant risk to the county of loss. We manage 2 operating budget. We consider Cape Cod Commission an operating budget, and the general fund is an operating budget. We have 1 enterprise fund, which is Dredge. We manage 12 different capital funds at this point, but they're slowly closing as we complete older capital projects. Because historically, before I joined the county would open a new fund for every capital budget that was approved. And so we stopped that. That's why there's 12. Eventually there'll be 2, and 1 will be Dredge and 1 will be the general fund, capital funds. We have grants and other special revenue funds that we manage. And as I mentioned, trust and stabilization funds as well. Sorry. We're looking here at revenues for all funds. I've expanded this presentation a little bit just to, I guess, provide you with additional information maybe that wasn't as detailed as this is now. I'm showing you the operating budget here initially over on the left-hand side of the screen with the budget versus the actual revenue that had been received as of September 30th. Same with Cape Cod Commission and the dredge. What's new here are federal, state, and local grants that I'm providing you this information for. And you may ask, why isn't a budget provided? Because many of these grants last multiple years. So we track these for what we call the life of the grant. And so to provide you with ARPA here, I would be providing you with a budget of over $40 million. Well, that's not what we have left to spend right now. So it's more, I think it's less confusing to provide it to you this way. Capital funds, these are the capital funds that we have that were authorized and have yet to be expended. In addition to OPEB trust, we do not place a budget on OPEB trust. The only entries, if you will, to that fund are the annual contributions of $500,000 and investment revenue. Stabilization fund is the same. If there's any revenue that's appropriated to the stabilization fund, you would see that here. We do not establish a budget because we would never want to allow anyone to be able to withdraw or place any funds there because it's all by ordinance, right? It's required by ordinance, and we have budget controls in place. So it would not allow anybody that had munis access outside of the finance office to access those funds at all. We have other special revenue funds, and what are those containing? The Aqua Fund is a good example of the other special revenue funds. Your Clean Water Center, or what used to be your test center, is a good example of what's in those other special revenue funds. Here's expenditures provided for you in the same manner, like operating budget, Cape Cod Commission, dredge enterprise. I provided you with a percentage. It's important to look at percentage expended and
Director
some
Vogel.
of these funds.
Sorry to interrupt real quick. I think for the most part, if delegates can keep their questions till the end, but if there's something pertinent to something exactly that we're looking at, feel free to raise your hand and I'll recognize you. Delegate Brazel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just gonna, ask you, the budget on capital funds, 40 million. Where's that number coming from? I'm not sure. Where do you get the $40 million that you get?
So annually, the county appropriates a capital budget with projects that are included with those budgets. These are the funds that had not been expended. So once a capital budget has been expended, if there's any balance remaining, it comes via ordinance to rescind that balance. So these are the remaining funds that have yet to be expended.
That isn't an annual number.
This is collective of the 12 different capital
Okay.
funds that are still open.
Okay, and the actual number then is what's actually being expended in the fiscal year?
What the actual is shown right here,
Yeah.
the 407,000 is what's been spent through September 3rd,
Yeah.
from July 1st
Right.
to September
fiscal year.
30th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. OPEB trust fund, you won't see any expenditures here. If you ever did, you should question it, right? If it has to go through an ordinance. Stabilization funds, there was an ordinance 24-606 that set capital stabilization funds aside. There was a very specific list of what was included in that and in that deposit to capital stabilization. And we draw those funds out as they're expended, but only typically once a year when the fiscal year is closed. Because we don't want to continue to constantly, dip into those funds. We've got them with Rockland Investment Trust. The funds are doing very well, and they're certainly earning more interest than we do with some of our other banking institution, like our vendor accounts and things of that nature. And then the other funds are the other funds that I explained before. They're, Aquafund is a good example. The Clean Water Center, which was the test center, is also another good example of what's contained in those funds. Okay, so here I'm providing you some additional information. This is a breakdown of the general fund revenue by department. This is the same method or manner in which I've provided this to you before. We have some revenue that was not quite yet due as of September 30th. And an example of that is the tax assessment to each member community. And so you'll see that you'll think that the revenue numbers are pretty low here. And this is where I was discussing earlier on, maybe, or we'll get to some cash flow concerns. And here's just provided another piece of information on general fund operating budget revenues. You see that PFAS stabilization on the bottom line there, $650,000. That was authorized during the annual budget process for FY26. That was transferred in the second quarter. Breakdown of general fund expenditures here. It's broken down between salaries, fringe expenses, and other expenses, and then other funding uses, we call them. Salary and fringe total 71% of the operating budget, so your personnel costs are significant. And this is a lot of numbers here. This is just providing you by department what the total expenditures were for the first quarter of the fiscal year, along with what the appropriated budget was. And it's really important. We take a look, we pay really close attention to the percent expended, and anything above, what we would anticipate as normal. We're providing financial analysis and digging into those numbers. So the total county revenue that was collected on the first quarter of the fiscal year, it trends with previous years. Our laboratory revenue has experienced significant growth. That is from both the rate change that took effect. In addition to that, it's the expansion of the services that the lab is able to provide. Registry revenue as of October 31st was up 13% over where it came in fiscal year 25. And then there are no expenses that we have incurred even to date that are excessive or anything that should be alarming at all. Cape Cod Commission revenue is provided for you here. You'll see that, it seems quite low, $22,000 in the first quarter, but the assessments and what's the line is environmental protection on the last line of that revenue is due in twice a year to the county, and it was not yet due at the first quarter. Cape Cod Commission, I've broken down their expenses the same way I broke down the general fund. And the same with the Dredge Enterprise. And that actual revenue number might be concerning to you, but I can tell you that as of November 30th, they had collected $810,000. But this is their busy season. So So they're actively dredging. They've got a project that they're completing. It's over $1 million project. So you'll see their expenses here, salaries, fringe and other expenses that would be things like supplies, utilities, diesel fuel, and other types of expenses in that manner. So I'm moving here to your unreserved fund balance. The unaudited value of that unreserved fund balance as of June 30th, 2025 was just under $11 million. We talk about why unreserved fund balance matters, right? Where there's best practices, the Government Finance Officers Association has best practices with regard to fund balance, unreserved fund balance, and retaining unreserved fund balance in the case of an emergency, in the case of operations, that at least a minimum of 2 months of operations. So here's just some information for you. I won't read it to you, but there are certainly best practices that the county looks to ensure that we are financially stable. We track our cash balance, and this is just an example of some of the work that we do. We track this on a monthly basis, and this goes back 10 years here. This is tracking it from the start of the fiscal year till the end of the fiscal year. And you'll see in 2025, that dip that is in September, that was the $14 million that went out to Revenue Stabilization Fund. And so we were watching cash on a daily basis at that point in time, because we have expenses that go out or one time a year, such as Barnstable County retirement assessment, that's due July 1st. We have other expenses that go out that'll be due, such as debt that are due and payable, not generally over the course of the fiscal year, but there's certain dates that they're become due. So we watch cash really closely. And this is just giving you some information about Cape Cod Commission. This isn't the same type of report, but this is their cash balances versus where their restricted fund balance is over the course of the year. You see that the 25 balance is just around $10 million. That was their restricted fund balance and where their cash equivalents were. You'll see it dip in 26. And the reason why you're seeing it dip in 26 is because you saw the revenue number that they had taken in $22,000, but their expenses were far beyond that. So that's why you're seeing this dip. You're going to see it come back up as we provide additional information as the fiscal year goes by. And there is dredge. So we know that dredge had a little financial stress that the county was able to help with some unreserved fund balance to be able to bolster the dredge for a couple of years. And this is the result of that. So they do have a positive retained earnings. And we're on track at this point after the rate was adjusted and reset, and to move in a more positive or stable position. So we can talk about pool cash more if you'd like to. We could dig deep into pooled cash before governmental entities were allowed to what we call pool cash, bring it all together. We have 101 active funds. We would have had 101 bank accounts. So pooled cash is really beneficial for for us. And in addition to that, we'll have banking institutions that say, you have a minimum of $1 million in order to get this rate that you have to keep in an account. So, so that also helps. But if you ever want to have a conversation about pooled cash, you call me anytime. Okay, any questions?
I know anytime I had a question, I looked up at Delegate Prezzo over there and he did too. So Delegate Prezzo, if you want to take us away.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you mentioned that there's no concern about the expenditures at this time being unexpected in terms of the budget. But I mean, I noticed a couple of them. I mean, several of them are within 25% or 30-something%, but some of them are way off that number. Miscellaneous and contingency, 73%. So, and then there's another one at 40%, the children's call. So explain for me why you still aren't concerned about those budgets staying in line, even though they're way beyond 25%.
Every department of the general fund and miscellaneous and contingency have budget areas that are retirement assessments. Those retirement assessments are due July 1st. Excuse me.
Stop sharing your screen.
So that payment is due July 1st, and it's significant.
Well, that explains that number, but other ones, like say, the other one I find the next highest is like 40% children's call. That's still, even though they're, ahead of the 25%, they're not going to be overspending. You're not concerned about that.
Not concerned because they also include the retirement assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Their budget is just not as large as some of the other departments.
Mm-hmm.
There it's mostly contains, excuse me.
Yeah.
Their operating expenses, but the retirement assessment for Children's Cove is significant.
Mm-hmm.
Miscellaneous and contingency also includes debt.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Delegate O'Malley.
If I could follow on that same thing, on that same line. You don't typically give a percentage for the actual to the budget. And I sort of understand why, but the fact is we're all doing it as we go through. We're kind of ballparking it and see, does that make sense? I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to look at this from a bigger perspective so that when we get these, it makes more sense to us. And I'm wondering if, theoretically, it should be about 25%. And what I think I'd be interested in knowing is, okay, what's the explanation for one that's way beyond 25% already or way short of it? What's wrong with that? And I wonder if there isn't some way you could incorporate that kind of, I mean, it seems to me that if we are actually at, somewhere between 20 and 30, maybe, I don't know, nothing to be said. But if it's beyond that or some parameter, it feels like for us to be able to understand this, I understand there are individual factors like this is only paid on July 1st. We don't know that. So it's harder for us to interpret it. And I'm just looking for a way that this could be communicated in a way that we would understand better, Karen.
I mean, we can certainly put together a list of expenses that are incurred at the beginning of the fiscal year or at certain points of the fiscal year.
Yeah, I think that would help. I mean, just a short note,
Sure.
About when money comes in or when expenses have to go out in the first quarter or going to be coming in later. That's why it doesn't show. But otherwise, those things catch when you look and see, holy smokes, that's 10% of where it should be, and what's wrong here? Anyway, just a thought.
Yes, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So the one thing I don't understand, we have that OPEB money, right? Because we have to pay OPEB. it's a big deal, but don't we have to pay OPEB money to retirees yearly? So how do we do that without taking it out of the fund?
OPEB is a trust fund, other post-employment benefits other than pension. And it is a trust fund. It is, yeah, the county is setting aside funds because the county has a long-term liability to support all of the retirees' group insurance that they participate in. That group insurance for retirees are budgeted, as we call it, as a pay-as-you-go system, where we budget it in an operating budget. So that's in miscellaneous and contingency. And so,
Okay, got it. So that's why. So we really only have to spend OPEB when we get into real trouble, I guess, right?
you are allowed to spend for retiree healthcare. Yes.
Delegate King, see you online there.
Yes, just to follow up on the previous question, I guess what I'd like to see in the budget is if we could, if just every line item, we could show the budget actual to actual, percentage to date, and then a short explanation right next to each line item about whether if it's over or under or whatever, and what our expectations are to go forward. I think that would sort of solve the problem that was discussed earlier.
And I think that's something as leadership, we can work with the administration to figure out how we get that information for delegates in a format that works. Delegate Frazell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a couple of other quick questions from the presentation. You mentioned that the financial officers recommend 2 months of operating expenses and unreserved fund balance, and we have 10 million. What would be our 2-month number, and how does it compare to the 10 million that we have?
That's a great question. So we calculate it that's at a minimum.
Yeah,
Their
Yeah.
GFOAs at a minimum. So we look at cash flow needs. We looked at more factors than, to get to where's the correct percentage, and that was presented to the commissioners earlier today.
Mhm.
But we were calculating somewhere around I shouldn't say somewhere. We have an exact number. I just don't have it with me. Was just about $6.5 million.
so we're above.
Where our needs are, not
Mhm.
necessarily where a 25% threshold is.
Yeah. But we're above then what the standard of the GF.
Yes,
OA.
which is why we brought forward a proposed ordinance. Thank you. Well, that's why we brought forward a proposed ordinance to transfer money
Yeah.
to capital
Okay,
stabilization.
that connection is helpful. Thank you. One other quick question. So on the Cape Cod Commission, their cash flow is really, if I'm reading that chart correctly, in serious trouble. So who takes care of the cash flow when there's an inability, the money isn't coming in? Is it in their own account? Do they have some reserves to draw on to cover the timing difference? How does that timing difference for the Cape Cod Commission get covered?
They have $10 million in restricted fund balance.
Restricted.
Yes.
So they can use it for cash flow for this purpose? I mean, the word restricted suggests it's not available.
Restricted beyond what they can spend it on,
Mhm.
right? Cash flow is different than expenditures,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
This is, in addition, as I had mentioned before, we pool cash.
Mhm.
So most of that, or some of that $76 million that at the beginning, the second slide,
Mhm.
that the county was managing as of 9/30
Mhm.
is in a pool.
Mhm.
And so they're participating in that pool,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So they're part of the reason, or all of the departments, because Dredge is in the same situation,
yeah,
right?
yep.
Negative cash situation.
Right.
As of September 30th. But because we're pooling cash, we're not, there's not a need for what we call interfund borrowing.
Okay. Yep. So it's in the pooling. Thank you.
Any other questions? I had one quick one, just looking at the dredge graph that we saw there. There were two lines there, a blue line and a yellow line on that dredge graph. Would you mind just explaining the difference between those two?
The blue line represents their retained earnings. The yellow line represents their cash or cash equivalent at the end of those periods. So you'll see that the yellow line is in a negative situation because we saw that their actual expenditures exceeded the revenue that they had taken in as of September 30th.
Understood. And then follow-up, I had separately, just looking at these discussions on cash flow and the unreserved fund balance. How often do we get disbursements from the Registry of Deeds on the funds that they collect? Is that a quarterly thing or more often?
How often do we receive receipts from the Registry of Deeds?
Yes.
Monthly.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I think we have another presentation on deck.
Finance Department undertook a task of preparing a fiscal forecast for the county. This is for the general fund only. So our financial analyst, Megan Rogers, was instrumental in assisting me with the preparation of this forecast. She presented it with myself at the commissioners meeting. And so I'm giving her credit, but she's not here with us, but today. But I certainly appreciated all of her assistance. So the fiscal forecast that we prepared, as I had presented to the assembly a while ago, I think during the summer, we wanted to test out the financial wellness of Barnstable County. And so we went back a number of years to understand the past. And so that we could get to this point to prepare this forecast for the future. This forecast that we used went back 5 years, though. The data, we learned a lot from studying what had happened in the past financially with Barnstable County, and not all, it's not all about numbers, right? You have to take into account demographic and other information that assists you in being able to determine a forecast. We actually used two different types of forecasts. We took the best pieces out of the Department of Revenues, and we used another forecast method that a consultant here in Massachusetts, whose work is widely appreciated. We used his as well, and we married the two. So we took a hybrid approach. We extrapolated data, as I had mentioned, from 2020 to 2025. We used weighted averages in some instances. We studied salaries, fringe, operating expenses, other expenses. We used regression analysis. We had many different factors in preparing this forecast. So this forecast extends out 10 years. The revenue projection, the methodology that we use for revenue projection depended exactly on what type of revenue we were projecting. For Registry of Deeds, we began with a compound annual growth rate, and then we tempered that growth because we thought it was too aggressive. For county tax assessments, we're limited to 2.5% on an annual growth. For the court lease, we extrapolated the Q1 results for the current fiscal year over to expand that for the full FY '26 court lease revenue, and then we added 2.5% annual growth. Lab fees, as I had mentioned in my previous presentation, have grown substantially. We're growing these at a 5% annual growth. And that was tempered from what the department had provided to us with regard to where they thought their growth would be. We tempered that down a bit. IT services, at this point in time, we were considering a rate study in FY '27. That the rates for IT have not been addressed for a number of years. So we thought that there would be an implementation in FY '28. Then we looked at a 2.5% annual growth thereafter. Investment revenue has been positive over a number of years. We estimated a constant $25 million balance on hand and a 3.25% yield rate. The sheriff retirement reimbursement, this goes back to some previous expenditures that the county incurred that are now being reimbursed by the state, at $500,000 annually up to 2034. So we included those as well. So we have 10-year revenue projections here. These are broken down by department for 27 to 36, FY 27 to 36. Just highlighting a few here, the most significant ones. We have the registry of deeds, we have the court leases, and we have tax assessments here. So the registry of deeds revenue, as I had mentioned before, we used an annual growth rate, and then we tempered that growth rate. So as I had mentioned, that the CAGR that you see here up on this screen, if you can see it, because it's very small, sorry, compound annual growth rate was 3.6%. We said, that's too high. So we didn't want to be that aggressive. So the blue line is where we were looking at for our projections for this purpose. Our expenditure projections had a variety of methods on which we used to project. We looked back the past 5 years, historical trends, weighted averages for salaries. We looked at a 6% annual growth rate. So that would include your COLA and your step increases and any other increases that, whether there be some sort of a comp study in the future. So fringe benefits, health insurance was the most difficult, I think, to project. We used some stress testing. We used what we called a stress to 7 scenario to make some assumptions about healthcare costs and trends in the future. We've seen the calendar year, our retirees, the county's retirees are on calendar year health plans. We saw those come in at 12.25% for calendar year 26 increase. Basing that, we know that health insurance premium rates are increasing significantly. So that's what we used here. For operating budgets, we used historical trends. We used weighted averages FY 22 to 25. And then we had some percent increases based on very specific categories. We used what we're projecting for debt into the future. As you know, we have some PFAS liabilities out there. We're not sure how high they are. We did a couple of different scenarios, one with the PFAS that we were borrowing $45 million and one without. We use 10% increase on insurance premiums for like property and liability and things of that nature. And then the dredge department pays an indirect cost rate to the general fund, and that's to support the services that they receive from finance and administration, IT, things of that nature. We used a 2.5% growth rate on that. We're funding OPEB at $500,000. I included PFAS operations and maintenance, the same as we have fiscal 26, although now I'm learning that that's going to decrease. So we have 10-year expense projections here by department, FY 27 to 36. Some highlights here: salary and fringe and debt make up a tremendous amount of the budgets here. And you can see where those how those are trending. Those are kind of the primary drivers here. So if we look at our current and future debt outlook, what we look at here is, what do we have we have bonds that are outstanding that are responsibility of the county. What has been authorized for borrowing, and we haven't borrowed it yet, but we will in the future. And then what is our proposed debt, and our financial policies, and really the rating agencies look at a 10% maximum of your operating budget when you think about having to incur annual debt service costs. And so that line here represents that 10%. And you can see that we have exceeded the policy in 2030. Looking at budget percent increases over time, this chart just provides you with where your revenues are, where your expenses are, and that can probably going to tend to lead you to believe that your revenues aren't going to be able to keep pace when you're looking at this. And I think this is exactly what I wanted to highlight here, is that the orange bars here, if you will, on this chart show without PFAS borrowing. The blue, if the county does borrow for PFAS, that $45 million, you'll see where you are. Nevertheless, you're not in a positive budget position, right? Your expenses are going to exceed your revenue moving forward. You would need to tap in to that revenue stabilization, but that's not enough. So then this looks at your undesignated fund balance and your stabilization funds together, and the county should be very proud of what they've been able to put together or set aside for specific purposes. The stacked bar chart shows your unreserved fund balance, and then your general stabilization, emergency stabilization, PFAS, capital, and then your revenue. So in tough times, you've got these funds to rely on, which is great if that's the decision of the county. So we have some policy considerations that should be on the forefront here. Beginning in 2028, your expenditures exceed your revenue, so there should be a plan in place, right? We've got a little bit of time to put a plan in place. We should consider defining what a structural deficit, what the parameters are of a structural deficit. We need to adopt formal policies. There's a number of areas that that the county could consider, and this is just providing some information for you. Did you want me to stay here? I don't want to wasn't planning to read the slide to you. Do you want me to?
No, no worries. And we've got copies of it here, and these look like great ideas moving forward, but none that we're going to parse into today. Bart, questions from delegates that delegates do have? Delegate Brazel?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for doing that work. And as grim as it looks, it's important to put that on the table. Just a couple of questions. What happens if we exceed that 10%, if debt service exceeds the 10%? I'm not, I know that's a good policy, but I don't know whether that's some kind of legal mandate. So we could always exceed it, even though it would not be ideal. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is no legal mandate whatsoever. In fact, county government doesn't have a debt ceiling. There's no debt ceiling set by Mass General Law for
Great.
county governments, which is different than towns or cities.
Okay,
But yes, this is a, if you will, a self-imposed
okay,
10%.
right. I'm not questioning the wisdom of it, but just understand where, where it comes from. Thank you. Then the second question is, and this is something probably that's for the future, but just put the question out there to start. Has there been any thought yet at the administration and the commissioner level about how much we would use and draw on our stabilization funds, all those reserve funds, in the years to come in closing the gap between the revenue and the expenses that are projected? Doesn't look like we need to do that in FY27, but we're starting to need to do that in FY28. Just wondering if there's been some thought applied to that yet in deriving some kind of policy about that or not.
We are currently working on the financial policies, updating our financial policies, which will include a section on revenue. And this will be included within that section.
Delegate Owen?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a big question. Administrator Dutton mentioned that you sent a letter in opposition to the state taking over the Registry of Deeds in those counties where we still have it. Does that put our revenue source of the Registry of Deeds in danger? I've not heard exactly what the thought process is, but all of these, every one of these projections for the next 10 years depends on the Registry of Deeds. And if that letter is an indication of the danger of that, I'd love to know what that is, and makes me very nervous.
I think I would share your nervousness, although there's nothing in the legislation or the proposed legislation that would indicate that there would be a shift of revenue stream. But again, what the legislation is looking for is simply a study committee to begin the process of potentially moving the registry to under the state purview. So questions about where revenues would go, whether or not we would maintain our revenue stream, still up in the air. So that's just one of the reasons that I think the commissioners opposed even going down that route.
This letter is to oppose the study about that, because
Correct.
there's not many counties left at all, and certainly very few. Maybe we're the only one that still has the Registry of Deeds in our purview. So it's a very concerning thing. When you look at a 10-year plan up to 2034, that all depends on us having that kind of revenue. So I'm sure that you're going to be diligent in keeping up on that. And I'm glad you wrote the letter, and I hope we can get some political power behind that without state legislators.
Yes, Delegate O'Malley.
I'm going to dive into a very small number, but I think it's significant. We've got $25 million investment income, invest in a fund. We're getting 3.25% yield. Now, I tell you, my investment is a whole lot smaller, and I just checked it. I'm getting 3.539. Well, so do we handle this, or is this handled at the state level? Do we commit it and someone else? I don't understand how our investments are handled and how they're managed. If you could.
Sure. So this is a projection moving out 10 years, right? So this is not what it is today. Yes, And so your treasurer is responsible for managing all of your investments. And we have an assistant treasurer as well.
So it's not, we don't turn it over to a statewide investment management. You handle it. We handle it here.
Well, we have various accounts. Some of them are with the Massachusetts Municipal Depository Trust, and they call themselves MMDT. We have funds with that is directed through the state, but we have full control over those funds. We also have funds with Rockland Investment Trust. We have full control of those funds, but they're managing those funds just like they're managing other funds for other communities.
Right.
Right. And then we have our other accounts, such as our accounts with our local banking institutions, with money market accounts and things of that nature. So there's a variety of accounts, but this was just a projection moving forward. This is just trying to say what's going to happen in the future.
Got it. I didn't understand that was a projected number. Thank you.
Yes, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. 2 quick questions. Both on page 3 for those playing along. The graph seems to have the county excise taxes be much. Oh, never mind. I just answered my own question. That is the Registry of Deeds, not the money we get from the towns. Never mind. Ignore that. So the other question is, it says, in the expenditures, it says that we have to spend 500,000 on OPEB. But in the revenues, you say we get 500,000 from the sheriff, but we get $1 million from the sheriff every year.
Yes.
So it seems like you're charging us 500,000 from the 500,000 we're putting in, but that's separate, right? I mean, we get 500,000 from the sheriffs, which goes into our revenue. We pay 500 into OPEB from the sheriff's money, but we get $1 million from
You
the
receive
sheriff.
over $1 million, and you segregated $750,000 into one of the stabilization funds, and that's not by ordinance.
Oh, I don't remember that. All right, I'll look back. Thank you.
Yes, Delegate Prezell.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm following up on Delegate O'Malley. I would assume here that all of our investment activity is a very conservative investment. That something which is almost all like interest-bearing kind of investments. And
Not all of them, but
no equities, I would think.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if we're putting any of it in the equities.
So we, it's balanced portfolios for like Rockland Investment Trust, MMDT. They're balanced portfolios. So it's not like we're opening a bank account and we say, what is your interest rate today? 4.25%, right? So, but we manage risk. Absolutely. And we follow Mass General law.
I did have a quick question. I think this might be more for Administrator Dutton. I'd be curious to know, obviously, over the last couple of years, as far as I've been here, we've had the pleasure of passing a budget and then finding out from these presentations that we've got and bigger surplus coming in than what we spent, and getting to feel good about ourselves, that we're being conservative and setting money aside. Looking at these numbers, it looks like things might change in the coming years. And obviously, it's going to be a process that you're going to be at the helm of, and the Assembly is going to be here to appropriate and to approve the plan that you've come up with. So what's your big picture game plan? Not necessarily, how we're going to solve this right now, but how we're going to go about figuring out the process of solving it.
So I think you sort of bring up two issue areas. One is over the past number of years, we've seen a significant bump in revenues over and above what generally the Registry of Deeds projects. And that appears to be continuing this year. And every year, you know, I think there are folks in the county, whether it's me more recently or my predecessors, that said, you know, this can't last, this can't last. And lo and behold, it has lasted, and the values have gone up, and the volumes have maintained. And I've said repeatedly that at some point, you know, currently been the beneficiary of relatively high volume of sales and relatively high sales, you know, numbers, property values, or market values, I guess. And so that's been great for the county coffers over the years, last few years. But ultimately, the volume will decrease at some point, and the potential for a drop in market value will occur too. If folks remember, you know, 2008, 9, that happened all over the country, and certainly the Cape was affected, you know, significantly. So one of the reasons that we are adamant about trying to make sure that we stow away money into stabilization funds is because we don't have the stability that cities and towns have through their real estate tax. You know, real estate tax, usually a 95 to 99% collection rate. It goes up consistently 2.5% every year. We don't have any of that. We don't have the assurance that the real estate tax brings. We only have, you know, the market, the real estate market, how it escalates, either in volume or in market value, or both. And so so it's a double-edged sword. You know, when times are good, you know, we reap the benefits. And I think it's, you know, the Assembly understands that when we reap the benefits, we have to make sure that we're setting aside a good chunk of that money for the days when we don't have good times. Having said that, Carol's projections that she and Megan worked very hard on make us a certain number of assumptions concerning you know, whether it's escalation rates, you know, revenue projections, and you know, has done a good job of sort of qualifying and quantifying those assumptions. But I think our job now is to take those projections and build a plan around what we can do long term. So there's the revenue side and there's the expense side. So obviously, you know, we've all looked at our expense side, and we're looking at ways to begin to significantly slow down the rate of increase, and whether that means that we look at vacancies. You know, when we have a position vacancy, we take a hard look at that, figure out if it's absolutely necessary for that position to have another employee, or whether or not we can reconstruct and reconfigure how we do things in order not to have to rehire for that position. And that's one thing we do. Another thing we do, and we do this every year, but I think in particular over the next few years on the expense side, is analyze how we expend our general fund money very carefully, and we be even more protective of that money than we currently are. On the revenue side, you know, so there's so much that we can do on the expense side and maintain the services. So if it comes to the point where we have to decide, you know, hey, what services are we going to offer? What services aren't we going to offer? That's obviously a discussion with the commissioners. That's a discussion with the Assembly. And those are going to be very hard choices to make as we go along. On the revenue side, so I'll switch gears. I mean, we have to do as much, if not more, work on the revenue side to determine whether or not there's the potential for additional revenue sources for the county other than the ones that we've traditionally availed ourselves of, and whether or not those require legislative approval and legislative help in order for us to tap into. We also have to expand our at the one time, we're looking at curbing our services, and on the revenue side, we're looking at the potential of expanding services and asking towns to buy into those services to the extent that they need them. So shared regional housing is a good example, a very popular program Cape-wide with really all the towns. We've got 14 of the 15 towns, participating in shared regional service. And I use that sort of as a model, a potential model for what we need to do in the years out in order to protect ourselves from those revenue fluctuations. So it's going to be a multi-pronged effort, obviously. We'll take the work that Carol has done on the projections, and we'll sort of use that to plan policy changes that she mentioned briefly on how we define a sustainable budget. Because in a city or in a town world, that's relatively easy to do. Your revenues are predictable, and you can sort of make sure that you're not using free cash, for example, to fund your operating budgets. That's sort of one of the cardinal rules that you don't want to do. So that's an easy policy on the city and town side. On the county side, it's a little more difficult. We have to define what that sustainable budget really is, because it's difficult, as I said, because of the fluctuation and potential fluctuation in our revenues. So I've given you a very long-winded answer, but it basically curb our expenses at every opportunity we have. I'm always hesitant to do drastic things unless we have drastic times that call for drastic action. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we employ almost 250 full-time equivalents, and those folks rely on the county, and we rely on their work. So we have to take a close look at the expense side. We have to analyze every opportunity we have to potentially leave positions vacant when folks move on, retire, or move on to other opportunities. And then on the revenue side, we've got a lot of work to do just to see what our options are to generate additional revenue to fund the programs that are critical to the Cape, and honestly define what programs really are critical to the Cape. So.
Yes, Delegate Brazel, thank you for that answer.
Just if I can follow up a little bit on that. So in that process, in that thinking process you're going through, are you putting on the table as one of the ways to structure these budgets going forward, dipping into some of the reserves that we've created and in some manner or some amount in some kind of logical, consistent way?
Nope, that's a good question. And I would say for development of policy around how we expend on an annual basis, the answer would be yes. But I will say that in my view, and I would think, folks in the finance area, and certainly Carol sitting next to me would agree that your stabilization fund is designed for, the more like the 2008 meltdown. And if you have enough to look out and sustain yourself for sort of a 3-year period, then that is kind of what that's for. We now know that we've got, potentially got sort of structural imbalance, whatever that structural definition is. But we have a potential structural imbalance, and I don't think being prudent and somewhat conservative with money, that we would want to use our stabilization funds to just simply pay for any deficits on a yearly basis. We don't want to drain down that stabilization fund, because once you do that, you run into other problems that potentially compound the issue. You run into a declining bond rating, for example. And if we borrowed a significant amount, then you end up potentially paying more for your next bond issuance. So things like that.
With that, just one more follow-up, and I think this one might be for our finance director. Looking at these projections on slide 11, when we see those scary numbers, those are cumulative, right? Over the course of 8 years. So looks like by 2036, when we're at approximately the negative 12 million, that's cumulative over the 6 years that this graph is. It's not a 12 million shortfall in 2036.
No, I think it is. It's not cumulative.
No.
No, those are annual.
Um, and with that, the follow-up that I had is, obviously we can't bank on having the sunny days that we've had with that 3.6% being lowered to your conservative 2.1% average. But is that just the kind of normal day that we're expecting with this weighted average, or is this a rainy day with your weighted average? Or is that kind of the new normal that we're projecting with?
So I would say that it's the new normal, that, we were not as aggressive as, there's different models out there, as I had mentioned before, that you can use to project revenue. And they're, for the most part, they're very accurate and they're widely used. However, I just really thought it was too aggressive. And, I had other conversations with other colleagues and, just reviewed the information, went back and said, what if we took, a weighted average? What if we took 21 and 22 and just threw that out? And that's what we did. We threw out 21 and 22. And we said, why don't we take a weighted average of a number of years and then look at, instead of 3.6%, tempering that down. So that's why you're seeing that less aggressive number. It doesn't take into account something. I couldn't project what happened in 2008. I couldn't project that again because, number one, I couldn't, of all the research that I conducted, I was unable to find a way in which I could project out what year would that happen. Is it going to happen? I just wasn't able to do that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. I'm tracking, Assistant Administrator Barakir presenting a brief overview of the capital. Thank you very much for the presentations.
Good evening. Vera Harik, Assistant County Administrator. A hard act to follow all that sobering news. I do have we're presenting at our Board of Commissioners approved and moved up to you a proposed ordinance. This is basically the kickoff of our annual budget process. Proposed ordinance for the fiscal 27 capital budget. Every year we do a 5-year capital improvement program, but we only bring to you and to the commissioners a request for an appropriation in single years. And so of the fiscal 27 through 31 capital improvement program, we have in fiscal 27 a request for $904,000. I think you have the proposed ordinance before you. There are 6 projects on it. I can summarize them quickly. I am prepared to make a presentation to you all unless your patience is worn totally thin with regard to financially related presentations. It's really at your pleasure. I assumed I would be doing so at some point, and I'm ready now if that's your pleasure.
Yeah, in that case, let's bring up the presentation
All right.
and as delegates have questions, if you do.
While I'm doing that, allow me to pass out hard copies. For delegates participating remotely, both the capital budget book and a copy of this presentation was emailed to you earlier this afternoon. So you do have the slides in PDF form. See if I can share. Yeah, Good. I think I am allowed as a presenter here. Try and get this moving. Here we are. So this, our capital improvement program, every year we do a 5-year projection. This presentation is 16 slides. I'll be I'll move forward as expeditious as possible. Obviously, questions that arise, please. I'm going to summarize the 5-year proposed capital improvement program and its financial implications, and then introduce a departmental capital request for fiscal 27, of which you see on the proposed ordinance, 6 projects in 27. Across, you'll see that fiscal 27 request is relatively benign relative to the 5-year projected spending, and I'll explain why this is. For the 5-year period, proposes spending of over $30 million, nominal amounts associated with cooperative extension, dredge, and the health department, relatively speaking, and vast majority of the expenditures concentrated within the facilities department. Of that amount, as you're probably will recollect, but for the people watching at home, the county does receive reimbursement for its expenditures from the courts, and the court system rents at varying percentages of the building space, the square footage, several buildings from the county, and we are reimbursed in proportionate measure for our expenses in managing those properties. So of the $30 million, we will expect 20.4 million to come back. But the problem is the cash management situation, because the reimbursement, we would have to borrow in order to fund those projects, because contractors want to be paid in a timely fashion, but the reimbursements don't come back to us until a good 18 months later. And they do so on a rolling basis relative to our expenditure across the period of time the project is underway. So it becomes a cash flow situation. And just harkening back to Carol's comments, that debt service is part of our operating budget on an annual basis. And so we would be, if you saw us violating the curve in the projections Carol showed you at the 10% margin of operating budget, with this additional expenditure, that violation becomes more profound. So just so here's the a summary. You know how I love charts, and so I do my best to try and make them as explanatory as possible. The 4 departments anticipated to spend across the 5 years are these, and this is where the funds. This is how the funds fall out. So in the red circle there, you'll see the appropriation request of $904,000 for 27, but it's in fiscal 28 and thereafter that the expenditures get more substantial, and that is because of basically 2 projects. Oh, you've already. I'm actually beating myself to the punch here. You guys you've absorbed that it's 900,000 in 27, but 30.3 in 30.4 by 31. So to the 2 projects, the $30 million of the amount rests with the facilities department, and of that amount, over half is in 2 projects that are going to have to happen within and slated to begin for reasons of dilapidation to some extent, and some of the buildings slated to begin in fiscal 28. And so fiscal 27 benign, fiscal 28 a big conversation. Renovation of the first district courthouse, $3 million across the total the time period of the project. But the county has no county staff in the first district courthouse, which is over here on our campus. We receive reimbursement of 97% of the costs of these renovations. Again, the timing is problematic. Why not 100%? Well, because we do rent space to, I think it's the district attorney. District attorney has an office over there, and so it takes it down 3%. The second district courthouse in Orleans, the courts occupy entirely, and so whatever is spent is 100% reimbursed. They have 100% of the square footage of that building. The two of these account for a very substantial amount of money needed to borrow. We would have to borrow. We don't have the cash flow to support that. And so, again, here's the borrowing would be across the 5 years, call it 30.4 million. And only a small portion of that is already earmarked for the capital stabilization fund that was set up a couple of years ago. We have no recourse but to borrow the funds is the Cliff Notes version here. And so here's the violation of that curve in our expenditure over time of the of above 10% of our operating proposed anticipated operating budgets if that borrowing were to take place. This describes that. So for your references, describes where that number comes from in the policies. Again, fiscal 27. I'll go through the projects relatively quickly. Are there any questions thus far? Thank you. So,
Delegate Frizzell had it.
oh, I'm sorry.
Just a
Pardon me.
question. So it shows that we're going to far exceed the 10% policy. So while we don't have any legal requirement to stay within 10%, do we have any idea how that would affect our bond rating? I mean, we seem to be stuck having to borrow that money, yet the cost of borrowing could increase. And
Certainly.
I don't know
Yeah.
whether that is going to get reimbursed from the state.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, let me read in the subtext of the question is, what do we do about this? And there's borrowing if we're forced to borrow, but an approach that we would like to pursue is to ask the courts, DCAM, to take over those two projects entirely. So that was to avoid that extremely large borrowing.
Yeah.
That is a conversation for yourselves at the political level, and so there are many ramifications of that. And I know that our county administrator and our team has Michael's been working on this, actually, working our way through what questions we need to know the ground that we're on, evaluating the lease that we have, and what ranges of motion there might be in initiating that conversation with the courts.
And I think, I'll speak for myself here, but we would definitely like to keep getting updated on how that conversation is going.
Absolutely.
Because, to me, it's absolutely preposterous that we're getting put into this position. And it seems like, for the state, $18 million or $20 million in this context is a blip in their budget. But it's really putting us in these really tough fiscal constraints. So, if there's a way to work this out with the administrative agencies, fantastic, and keep us posted. But otherwise, I mean, we need to get our delegation in here and we need to have conversations with them about how we resolve this legislatively, if that's what it takes, and before it's too late. So please keep us posted.
Certainly. Michael, did you have any further comment, Michael? Yeah, I mean, we're actively engaged in this. This is the obvious solution, really.
Delegate Harder?
Sorry, quick question. You say the DA,
Oh, DCAM, DCA.
no, I meant,
Oh.
you said the district attorney takes 10%.
No. District attorney has 3%, has an office in the first district courthouse.
Right.
And so which amounts to 3% of the square footage of the first district courthouse.
But that the district attorney being in that building is why the state justifies only paying us 90% reimbursement instead of 100%.
No doubt. For the first, I understand. I'm actually more conversant in this than certainly you guys would be. So it is easy to be confused. First district courthouse, 100% of the square footage is in play. County occupies none of it. The DA occupies 3% of it, And the courts, state courts occupy 97% of it. Therefore, whatever we spend in upgrading, managing the First District Courthouse, we receive 97% of that cost. Yes. It's commensurate. The deeds probate building, we receive 50% of that. Superior Courthouse, our offices occupy 25%. And we'll get to that in one of these projects. But we occupy 25%, and so we receive 75% of reimbursements for projects on the Superior Courthouse. Other questions?
Any questions?
All right. 2 departments, 6 projects in 2027. Dredge needs a new vehicle, and when Ken needs a new vehicle, Ken wants a new vehicle. So I mean, there's the various deeds probate, HVAC, air handler, and controls need to be replaced. Same with an electrical service upgrade while they're at it. The same with the Superior Courthouse. We have in prior year appropriations already launched the Superior Courthouse exterior renovation. And so there are a couple of add-ons to that we're putting forward for appropriation. Again, while we're at it at the Superior Courthouse to repair the retaining wall that is along 6A and Main Street. It's in crumbling condition. And while we have the campus kind of torn apart and disrupted to accomplish that repair as well. And electrical service upgrades for the Superior Courthouse. Again, you will notice that both FAC 36 deeds probate electrical upgrade and FAC 40 Superior Courthouse upgrade are both $190,000 in fiscal 27. That is the 10% part of the actual cost of installation for putting together the design documents and the bid documents, and then having the bids. So bids in fiscal 27, and then among the fiscal 28 appropriations we'll be back for to talk about is 1.9 million for each of those projects to accomplish the electrical upgrades. Lastly, here in Fin 2, here is the remainder of the finance department and office administration renovations that were discussed last year. We proposed an upgrade to the entire office suite at $200,000. Let me just go to that one right now. Based on but you noted, the assembly noted that there was a master planning and facilities assessment process ongoing, and so chose to wait for to commit the $150,000 until that was done. Sure enough, that now it's back. The recommendation was by the facilities assessment people that the office suite is indeed in post-Soviet condition and it's basically needful of a facelift. Price has gone up a little bit. It's 150,000 from 150,000. It's now 159,000. So that combined with the 50,000 you appropriated would be used during, again, while the Superior Courthouse is vacated for the exterior renovations. Get all of this done all at once. Let me back up quickly to the other ones. There's Ken's red truck. These probate, these are the details of those, and you'll notice on these slides, I have the budget book. So I've also circulated our budget book for this year, and the pagination of the budget book conforms with these slides. So you can actually look up the more detail, a fair amount of detail on the projects themselves, and so how we came up with those numbers and the debt service costs associated with them. In the interest of time, there's the retaining wall along 6A. It's crumbling, and that concludes the presentation. I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have.
Delegate Frizzell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I haven't been able to dive into the details of the budget book yet, so I'll just ask quickly. For this We just can't take the money out of the capital stabilization fund or something to pay for it?
Well, it's an excellent question. And are we introducing today the capitals,
Yeah, it's been
yeah,
interesting.
I mean, so that is a possibility. So we didn't want to presume. But it is within the budget process to
Well-
decide to fund these projects with a different funding source. If Carol, if I'm misspeaking or.
Well, the reason I ask is you're also asking us to transfer over $4 million from the general unreserved fund balance into capital stabilization. So it just seems to me
Yes.
like 904,000 out of that number, rather than borrowing and paying interest charges. I don't know, I wouldn't.
Absolutely. No, that's. yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. But again, we don't want to presume, we can't presume that the proposal would go through and so on. So. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentations today. Looks like the Finance Committee has work to do.
Thank you.
And then with that, the Assembly will convene. And Delegate Harder has a couple reports to brief us on 2 committee meetings, one of which is the Public Services Committee, which I'll ask Delegate Harder to present on my behalf. And then we'll work through the orders of the day that go with them.
Thank you. So to start with, everyone has received the reports from both the Public Services Committee and the Economic Affairs Committee. So I'm not going to read them out loud because you'll fall asleep and it will take time. But what I will highlight for the Public Services Committee, we met and discussed the dredge. The main topic of conversation was we got informed that the state fiscal 27 budget will not include the dredge grants that they usually give to the towns. So we proposed to write a letter to the state asking them to put the funds back. And that letter that we had discussed at the committee meeting had additions made to who we would send it to. We decided not just to send it to the governor and the lieutenant governor, but to everyone from our delegation. So, and a general discussion of the dredge came up as well, because there's still problems. The reason the dredge is not, fiscally balanced every year is due to things that the dredge cannot control. Whether towns get their permits and the weather and time of year restrictions. For example, I believe it was Chatham used to have a longer time that they were allowed to dredge. Then a new bird showed up. Now they have less of amount of time that they're allowed to dredge. So many things are out of the dredge's control. So we just went over that and discussed there may be ways for the county moving forward to help with the permitting process, but that's for a future meeting. So anyway, you will see the letter. You've received a red line and a copy of the final letter that we're going to ask you to send to the state. Do we do that now? So I am going to ask for a motion to send the letter to the state. Thank you.
Yes, Delegate Harder, and I will ask you to make that motion.
I would like I move that we send the final revised letter concerning the dredge grants to the state.
Second.
Yes, so now it's going to be up for discussion. I see Delegate Brazel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So do we know how much we get in grants for our dredge program that actually is in danger not being funded in FY '27 from the state.
So to my understanding from the conversation we had in committee, we don't directly receive these grants, rather towns apply for a pot of money at the state level and that gets integrated into their budgeting for then paying the dredge out of either the general fund or from these funds. If I remember correctly, it was in about the 30% ballpark range of town funds that they spend on the dredge are usually from the grant. But that changes year to year.
That seems like that's a pretty significant understanding right there. That the loss of these grants wouldn't directly impact us. It would put the towns in the position of having to come up with that 30% extra, which might or might not impact on our revenue. They could suck it up and raise the tax rate and deal with it. Okay, all right, that's important.
Delegate Harder.
Thank you. It really would affect us though, because, it's, some of the towns are hanging on by a thread in order to do the dredge projects because they have a lot of them. And if they don't get their grants, they're not going to be able to dredge. And that affects the county in so many ways, because it doesn't just affect the town, but it affects all the revenues, because if tourists can't sail out of a harbor, they're not going to pay to do their boat. So I'll just leave it at that there are major ramifications for everyone if the towns don't get their grants.
Any further discussion on this? With that, Mr. Clerk, if you don't mind calling a roll.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Kessin,
Yes.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Yes,
Delegate Killian, Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
yes,
Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
That's 12 delegates representing 87.08% of the county's population.
Thank you very much. Moving next, again to Delegate Harder for your report on the Economic Affairs Committee meeting of December 10th.
thank you, Deputy Speaker. Again, I'll let you read the reports. It's long, but what we have done, the last Economic Affairs Committee meeting voted to file a luxury real estate transfer fee home rule petition with the Assembly. What that means is you received a copy of the draft petition that was discussed at the committee. It is a draft. We are not voting on it. What we were asking, now that you have the draft, we know there were many concerns brought up at the meeting from Delegate Frederickson, from Delegate Wyman Colombo, and others. So we're asking that at this point in time, you read the draft and you study, come up with any actual amendments that you would like to see. You create your amendments if you want to go to the town for help with that, or if you know already what you want your amendment to say. And please send those in to the committee. And there's eventually, we will get the amendments, and from there, we will again go through, there will be committee meetings, then we will present things to the Assembly, and there will be at least one public hearing. But I just wanted to, so as it stands now, I would like you to accept the draft home rule petition and come up with amendments for it. Thank you.
Yes, Delegate Prezell.
I have a couple of questions here. I'm kind of confused. It's all procedural questions, not substantive questions. So we're being asked to take what's now been submit it into the assembly this afternoon, and then propose amendments to the petition, and those are submitted to the Economic Affairs Committee for the Economic Affairs Committee to then sort through and come back to the assembly with a new petition as amended? So I'm confused.
So the way it will work is, like I said, we've hit a wall now. We've gone as far as we can without having written amendments from delegates who want things changed in the home rule petition. For example, one delegate wants a section on environmental protection. And we want an amendment about that so we know what they want it to say, how far they want it to go, things like that. Because we can't move forward without getting people's amendments.
So I think
I'm still confused.
yeah, to follow up on that, I think procedurally going through it, what Delegate Harder discussed is what we discussed in the committee as well. Is this proposal is now introduced as an actual legislative document to this here Assembly of Delegates. So rather than delegates proposing changes in the ether to an idea that we've discussed, this is the actual legislative proposal that is in front of the Assembly, which provides delegates an opportunity to propose amendments at a timeline that will be published by Assembly leadership on an actual tangible document. And then those will be consolidated in committee and then come for debate, discussion, and further full Assembly. Clerk Fletcher, if you want to add.
I'm hoping this will make it much cleaner. And I do see Speaker Warner there. My understanding has always been that when we got to this point and it was introduced as a home rule petition, that we would treat it like any other ordinance, the same as we're going to treat the capital budget, the same as we treated the ordinance that finance had, which means whatever committee it gets referred to, we'll deal with it, we'll make recommendations, but that doesn't mean that any of the delegates can't make amendments on the floor, just like you could with any other ordinance.
Well, again, I need clarity on this point. This, as it stands, it's now officially submitted to the Assembly. If we have an amendment, then we submit that to the committee, but the committee isn't going to then amend the petition. So I'm puzzled by why we're going to submit them to the committee.
Can I, and I'll let Speaker Warner follow up. Again, my understanding is this is now something just like the two other ordinances that has come to the clerk. It's not going to get a number because it's not an ordinance. And so to my understanding, none of that's really been fully decided yet. And so where it gets referred to or how that, how that committee deals with it, it wouldn't be any different than the Finance Committee is going to deal with the other two ordinances or any other ordinance or legislative proposal, yet to be determined. Our rules, and again, this is a home rule petition, right? If it was an ordinance, this would be really clear under our rules. If it dealt with money, it would have to go to the Finance Committee. If not, the Assembly can vote to refer it somewhere, or the Speaker can refer it somewhere. That's all. That's where we are right now, right? No different than the two ordinances that have been submitted tonight, right? Those will go to Finance because that's our rules. Where we go from here and how this is dealt with as a legislative proposal, don't know, and maybe not for tonight.
The reason
And I'll recognize Speaker Warner, who had her hand up virtually.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Yeah, I understand where Delegate Frizzell has the confusion because but I understand why you're trying to do it that way so that we can extend the ability to look at how much more work, if you will, needs to be addressed within the context of what is currently put together so that, a final proposal can be voted on by the full Assembly. The question becomes, what happens to those amendments? And that's where I see the confusion is that if it goes simply to the committee as an amendment, then it may never come back through full circle to the assembly to have any of those potentially added on or not. And so I think that we need to clarify that in some way, and I'm not comfortable with the way this is currently. I'm not sure this is the right answer to get there. I understand the reason, because we want to make sure that we do go back to the delegates and have anybody who's had an objection other than what we've already changed in the proposal to have the opportunity to suggest an amendment. So I think we need to come up with a different solution for that. Thank you.
So maybe this will help to make something clear for those of you who are in committees and are familiar with this. A committee can't do anything to vote to bind the assembly. That's why when you're in committees, you're just making recommendations. So if somebody gave an ordinance to a committee, whether it's finance or economic affairs, they couldn't kill it. It's going to get a vote up and down in the assembly. All they can do is make a recommendation on it if it's in front of them. So in an ordinance situation, like you can't, an assembly committee can't act on behalf of the body. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, clarify.
Please, Delegate Harder.
Thank you. I just suggested amendments come to the committee because I don't know that everybody else who's not on the committee would appreciate getting your amendments. But if you want to send it to everyone, go ahead. I just said send it to the committee because that's who will be going over the amendments first. As Clerk Fletcher said, any amendment that gets sent to the committee will go in front of the assembly. It will go in front of any public hearing we have, unless time-wise, we end up having a general discussion at the assembly before a public hearing. But the committee will not be erasing, changing any amendments. It's just getting them and receiving them, putting them, discussing them, putting them where they should, figuring out where they would go, things like that. But no, we're not going to hide anything. You know me. The reason we've had 142 meetings is because I'm all about transparency. So we will not be changing or deleting any amendments. It's just that we know all the complaints. No, we don't know all the complaints. We know the complaints we have had so far. And because we are now working on a legal document, it's time to have the complaints and concerns put into an amendment form instead of just discussing it.
Perfect. Delegate Fuller?
Yes, I agree with Delegate Frizel. It makes no sense to have two documents. You want to discuss it in your committee, you discuss it in committee and give us a new proposal with all your recommended changes for us to talk about. But to vote on this and then you're going to make changes, we're going to vote on it again, doesn't make sense.
We're not voting on anything.
So, and I think I'll speak here out of turn, but hopefully to put this conversation to rest for today is nothing is getting voted on today. The assembly now has in front of it a 10-page recommendation that's been filed with the clerk by a number of delegates who were on the committee on economic affairs, and in a manner that will be decided upon with consultation with the delegates here. The speaker is going to make a decision on the best way to move forward with this piece of legislation that is novel to this body, that makes sure everyone here who has proposed changes has an opportunity to weigh in and get those changes heard in front of the full body in an organized way. So that by the time this is actually introduced, not just as an initial introduction, but introduced for debate and discussion, every delegate and who had an amendment has had an opportunity to have that amendment heard in front of the full body. So I don't think there's been any decisions made. There's been a recommendation on the process that came out of economic affairs, but the speaker has not made a decision yet on what the final process is going to look like, and everyone's going to be heard and everyone's going to have an opportunity to weigh in, regardless of what contours that process has in the end. And I'm hoping to put the conversation to bed for tonight before we tie ourselves up in a knot. But I see a couple hands and I'm going to recognize Doug O'Malley.
Thank you. Just as as process here, I'm wondering whether this document is for internal use only, or can it be, or has it been shared with the towns? If, to the extent that if I'm looking for feedback from my town, can I share this with them? Is that acceptable?
Absolutely.
Clerk Fletcher.
So this was put in the public facing folder. I think maybe part of the confusion is that like I did not change it to put it in the same format that you see like the ordinance. Like, for example, the two ordinances that were put in today, they don't look like the one we're about to vote on later. I haven't put it in a formal format for the assembly yet. So it says draft on it. It is a legislative proposal, the same as an ordinance. And so it's already available to the public and you can share it with whoever you want. It is an official thing that has come to the clerks, that submitted as just the same way you'd submit an ordinance.
Thank you.
Doug Sampson.
So my concern is, my community has expressed a lot of concern about this, officials, and I'm very reluctant to show them a document that I anticipate will change when the amendments come. I would rather have the final document to show them and discuss with them.
So I guess maybe I can try it this way. This is, sorry, this is, okay. All right.
I appreciate the concern, Delegate Sampson, and Doug Frederickson, you also had your hand up?
Yes, I did. First of all, there haven't been 142 meetings. There might have been, I don't know, you can look at the record, maybe 8 or 10. This is, important to get it right. So we should be doing our due diligence. When we talk about, we're looking at very casually at taxing or feeing people. That shouldn't be taken lightly. That seems to be like we're just going over everybody's head. Well, if someone has something, let's take it and put it to good use somewhere else. We need to be very cautious that this isn't very popular in the general public. Amongst certain people, it might be, but we got to make sure we do it right if we're going to do this. And for the record, I voted against moving it here for kind of the reasons we're talking about. I think we need more work to be done. But I do like the idea that we got to get more input from our people, because we have not had the real good discussions. And I like the concept of how it's done, but I'd like to see it get vetted out more. If we can get to a good space with this, if we can.
Thank you very much, Delegate Frederickson. And I think I'll just close so we don't, Delegate Sampson's concern doesn't go unanswered, is, some things get discussed in 3-people groups. Some things move then on to 5-person group and get discussed there. And at a certain point, those things need to go to the 15-person group. So more concerns are going to be heard. This is a legislative body. It's not an executive body. We're not the Board of Commissioners. We're the Assembly of Delegates, and we assemble, we discuss, we debate, we disagree, and we settle on a final solution at a certain point in time. So Delegate Sampson, I can't tell you how to communicate to your community specifically, but there is not going to be a final product until there is a final product. And that's just the reality of a legislative proposal. So insofar as you can say, here's what's currently being proposed, and here's the changes I want to propose to it. That might be the best way to frame it, because there will be opportunities for amendments. And this is far from the last time that you will, for better or worse, hear about the transfer fee. And Delegate Frizzell, you're going to close us out here tonight.
I don't know if I will. It's a separate procedural question. And that is, maybe someone here can tell me this definitively. Is this ultimately going to be an ordinance? And if it is going to be an ordinance, as an ordinance, doesn't it go to the commissioners from here? And if that's not the process, please explain what the process is. Thank you.
So in our charter, it says the Assembly of Delegates may, by a vote of its members representing a majority of the population of Barnstable County, file a petition for a special law relating to the organization of the operation of Cape Cod Regional Government with the clerk of either branch of the general court at any time. Such petition shall, upon receipt, be referred by such clerk to an appropriate legislative committee, right? That's what this is. It doesn't require.
I thought, the word said, I thought the organization.
No, the Assembly of Delegates may, not the county, the Assembly of Delegates may.
Could you repeat that?
The Assembly of Delegates may, by a vote of its members representing a majority of the population of Barnstable County, file a petition for a special law relating to the organization or operation of the Cape Cod Regional Government with the clerk of either branch of the general court at any time.
Well,
So this is not an ordinance process, it's a petition.
yeah, but how does it relate to the organization? I mean, I'm not sure how it relates.
So
This doesn't relate to our business. This relates to the potential for the communities to impose a
that-
transfer tax. I'm confused at how you're getting that
Well-
reading.
I think that's a separate discussion for a different day, which involves a legal opinion that we've already received and was shared months ago on the feasibility of a transfer fee under the Assembly of Delegates, as well as just a question of Massachusetts general law and how home rule petitions are permitted to communities and to the county as well, and the words that are used in our charter. But that's a broader conversation for a different day.
So-
Delegate Fresno.
And also, like, I can just kind of try to tie it down to like our procedures and our internal rules, which means this doesn't have to go to the board, right? And this is as final as it's going to get unless a majority of you vote to change it, right? So like, that's just where we're at.
Well, my only comment on that is that we best be very certain that it doesn't have to go to the board, because for all the work we go into this, and there's a footfall later that we failed to take a step that we legally were required to take, all that work is for naught.
So all I can say to that is, we have counsel and we've asked counsel for an opinion. I can reshare that with you. Yeah, I mean,
Say it again,
for
please.
my own, we definitely, before we're embarking on this process, plumb the depths of that and asked Mead Tallerman, that is our counsel. I believe we consulted as well with, because we were doing charter review with Lauren Goldberg of KP Law, that this doesn't have to go to the board before it goes to the legislature. So I can dredge that up and I can dig that up and send that to you tomorrow, and we can
Thank you.
take it from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next topic, which is the Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance, December 8th, December 15th meeting recap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to just read this because it's quite long. The Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance met remotely on Monday, December 8th at 5 p.m. and Monday, December 15th at 4 p.m. The committee discussed proposed ordinance 2025-14 to authorize a supplemental appropriation to the fiscal year 2026 operating budget as enacted in ordinance number 2025-03 and 2025-04 for purposes of funding the Registry of Deeds basement renovation project. We also consider authorizing a letter from the Finance Committee on questions regarding Children's Cove, which I hope you all read because it's pretty comprehensive. On December 8th, the Finance Committee discussed proposal ordinance 2025-14 with members raising concerns about the ordinance's language, granting broad spending authority to the Board of Regional Commissioners. Thank you, Delegate Frizel. The committee agreed to amend the ordinance to remove language allowing the board to designate alternative funding resources, ensuring that any additional funding beyond the initial $170,400 appropriation would require Assembly authorization. The committee also discussed whether or not the proposal should reference ordinance 2025-03 or only 2025-04, with Delegate Frizel suggesting it belongs in the one-time expense ordinance, and that is 2025-04, Section 4, Facilities, Category B. The committee voted unanimously to favorably recommend the ordinance and with amendments to be finalized by Clerk Fletcher and Delegate Friesel before the assembly meeting today. Regarding Children's Cove, Administrator Dutton reported that the organization's offices on both Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket are funded entirely by grants and contributions from foundation with no Cape Cod regional government funding support island operations. The committee discussed concerns about the county's unique position as the only county in Massachusetts that directly funds the Children's Advocacy Center, CAC. The committee agreed to draft a letter seeking clarification on the funding structure, the history of how the county became responsible for that CAC, for potential alternative funding sources, including Cape Cod Healthcare, and whether or not there's a path to reduce the county's financial burden while maintaining the important services of children that Children's Cove provides. On December 15th, the committee reviewed and redlined a redlined version of the proposed ordinance 25-14. Other amendments proposed by the delegates at the Finance Committee meeting on December 8th. The members found the document to be thorough and were satisfied that it accurately reflected the committee's previous requests. Accordingly, the committee unanimously voted 5-0 to recommend that the full assembly adopt ordinance 2025-14 with those amendments. The committee also approved a letter of inquiry to be sent to the regional administrator Dutton regarding the Children's Cove budget. The committee amended the letter to specifically ask the projected caseload numbers for the Dukes and Nantucket counties to determine if the Barnstable County taxpayers are subsidizing services for those jurisdictions. The committee has requested a response no later than 60 days from that moment to ensure that this data is available in review for its upcoming budget. The motion to approve and send this letter passed unanimously. It was a lot of work. If you saw the red line from the original ordinance, I think it essentially cut it in half. So I hardly ask you to approve this item.
Second motion.
So that's a motion for the actual ordinance 2514 and a second. I'm looking at the red line here. Is there a motion to make that red line amendment?
I would move, Mr. Speaker, that we substitute for the original ordinance that was presented to us, the amended. So make the amended ordinance a substitute for the original, and we would vote on that.
Second that.
Perfect. And discussion on that amendment there by the full ordinance. Seeing no discussion, Clerk Fletcher, if we get a roll call vote on that amendment?
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Friesel.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller.
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian, Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
King,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson.
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
That is 1287.08%.
And any surprise discussion on the actual ordinance itself? Seeing none, can we get a roll call vote on it?
Absolutely. Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Friesel.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller.
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen.
Yes.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley. Yes. Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson.
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
That
Any-
is 1287.08%.
Okay, no orders of the day or new business. Any announcements? Oh,
There is new business. We have two ordinances that have been submitted, which I'm gonna number the capital budget. Ordinance 2026-01. It's last meeting of the year. And then the ordinance about the transfer to stabilization fund, which is 2026-02. And then we've received the home rule petition as well on the regional luxury, the transfer fee. So the two ordinances, since they deal with money, go to the Finance Committee automatically. Speaker will decide where to refer the other one, I assume, unless, well, and I will be in touch on how to schedule those. We are coming to the end of the year and holidays, so we'll have to figure that out. That's new business.
with that, any announcements? I will entertain a motion to
Wait,
adjourn.
wait.
Sorry. Speaker Warner, please announce.
Yeah, I'll just be a minute. First, I want to tell everyone to have a wonderful holiday season and to play safe and have a great time. And we'll get back to solving some of these issues in January. Our first meeting, as you know, is the 7th, and we'll be having a celebration of the new year together after our first meeting at the Family Cooperative. And it's about 15 minutes away from where we meet. So more details will be coming from Owen and or Emma. And you just need to get back to them to let them know if you, plus your one, whichever one that is, are coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Sorry for missing you on the screen there.
That's okay.
Seeing no other announcements, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. We're gonna get a second?
Second?
We get a roll call vote.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller,
Yes.
Delegate Gallagher, Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Yes.
Delegate Green, Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian, Delegate O'Malley. Yes. Dean Omen,
Yes.
Delegate King,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson.
Yes.
Delegate Ty.
Yes.
Speaker Warner,
Yes.
Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
We are adjourned.